A few days ago, while browsing the internet to learn something about the German-Croatian operation Rösselsprung, which took place from May 25th to June 6th, 1944, an attempt to find and eliminate the communist Yugoslav partisan leader Josip Broz Tito and his staff, I found the following statement in an online encyclopedia. The 15th Mountain Corps lost 1,145 men in the fighting around Sanski, most and Glamok, and in return reported 1,916 confirmed enemy dead and 419 captured rifles. The losses of the SS Paratrooper Battalion, 500, amounted to 576 dead and 48 wounded, meaning 624 out of 874 deployed soldiers, which is 71%. With these dramatic numbers for Battalion 500, I remembered a conversation I had a few decades ago with a former soldier of this unit. He had participated in Operation Rösselsprung as a junior member in the signals platoon and gave me completely different numbers. So I started searching for so-called primary sources, and I was successful right where the original combat reports are kept, in the Federal Archive's Military Archive. Among them was also the experience report, the contents of which surprised me quite a bit, and, as I suspect, will probably surprise you as well. But first, let's take a look at the general situation of the war at that time. In 1941, after the Balkans were taken by Italian and German troops, this region had developed into a supplier of resources vital to the war effort. As became known during the Nuremberg trials, the Balkans supplied 50% of the oil, 100% of the chrome, 60% of the bauxite, and 21% of the copper. In order to secure both this vital source of resources and the supply routes for the occupation troops in Greece, the Wehrmacht had stationed about 18 divisions in Yugoslavia, in addition to numerous other independent units and formations. However, these forces were never sufficient to keep this ethnically and religiously deeply divided region, with its competing partisan groups, even remotely under control. The result was an excessively harsh occupation policy by both the Italians and the Germans, involving so-called punitive measures. In response to attacks on Italian or German occupation soldiers, so-called reprisal actions were carried out, during which the inhabitants of entire villages became victims. This, in turn, drove crowds of people, men and women, who actually wanted to remain neutral, into the partisan brigades. Recognizing this completely misguided German occupation policy, on June 6, 1943, the commander of the 4th Brandenburg Regiment, which was temporarily deployed in Yugoslavia, wrote to the Commander-in-Chief Southeast until August 26, 1943, Colonel General Alexander Lohr, that the previous method of indiscriminately shooting all partisans could never lead to success. Many people only became partisans due to a combination of various circumstances. Ustasha, Muslims or Chetnik atrocities, hardship and hunger, terror and coercion by other partisans. They remain partisans because the way back is blocked by the German orders. They have lost their home and family, so they fight to the death. This mercilessly fought battle on both sides had, among other things, led to the morale of the German troops being so poor in some areas that many soldiers had volunteered for the Eastern Front to fight against the partisans, who could practically make themselves invisible after their attacks. Regardless of this, the German leadership in the Balkans had decided to launch a large-scale operation to eliminate what they considered their most dangerous opponent, Marshal Tito, real name Josip Broz, who had adopted the battle name Tito in 1934. However, they first had to find him in the wild and rugged terrain. After several reconnaissance missions, including those carried out by commando units of the Brandenburg Division, had yielded no results, several German commando units began to compete with each other simultaneously, as was typical during the later stages of World War II. This was done on the direct orders of Hitler, who no longer trusted the military intelligence service. SS Sturmbannführer, equivalent to Major, Otto Skorzeny was involved, as well as reconnaissance teams from the Brandenburg Division, which had been under the command of the Wehrmacht Operations Staff since 1943. However, as a whole, this division no longer had much in common with the former Lehrregiment Brandenburg zur besonderen Verwendung 800, which had specialized in commando operations. Nevertheless, a radio direction-finding team from the division had managed to provide the crucial clue. Tito and his headquarters were located in Drvar. Then, on May 6, 1944, with Hitler's approval, who, since August 26, 1943, had been the supreme commander in the southeast, Field Marshal Maximilian von Weichs issued the order to plan Operation Tito. 2 weeks later, on May 21st, Colonel General Lothar Rendulic, of Austrian-Croatian descent and commander of the 2nd Panzer Army, which had been deployed in the Balkans since August 1943 to fight partisans, gave the order for the operation to the 15th Mountain Army Corps, led by Lieutenant General Ernest von Leiser. The operation was given a name taken from chess, Knight's Move. Rendulic, whose 2nd Panzer Army, by the way, did not actually include any tank divisions, gave the staff of the 15th Mountain Army Corps only 3 days for the overall planning due to the ever-present partisan informants. The plan then called for strong motorized units of the 15th Mountain Corps to attack the Petrovac-Drvar region in a concentric assault. They are supported in this by elements of the 7th SS Mountain Division and the SS Paratrooper Battalion 500. It had been led since November 6, 1943, by the 27-year-old Hauptsturmführer, equivalent to Captain Hans Riebke, who was born on June 17, 17, in Darmstadt, Hesse. He passed away on August 19, 57, in Darmstadt. Furthermore, the plan was as follows. Paratrooper Battalion 500 lands at dawn, takes the enemy command center, and neutralizes it. According to the operation plan, Battalion 500 was ordered to be ready at the following launch sites by noon on May 24th. Group Riebke with staff, parts of the 2nd, 3rd, and 1st Platoon of the 4th Company in Bechgorek, with a total of 314 men. With the majority, the 4th Company without the 1st Platoon of the 1st Company, as well as 40 men from the Benesch Detachment, 6 men from counterintelligence, and an air communications team, with a total of 320 men in Agram. With the second wave of paratroopers, as well as the rest of the 2nd Company and the Parachute Training Company, with about 220 men in Banja Luka. For the overall operation on the Drvar objective, Red Circle, the German-Croatian units shown in blue were designated, with a total strength of 12,000 men. Here are the most important ones. Combat Group of the SS Volunteer Mountain Regiment, 13 from the 7th SS Mountain Division, Prince Eugen under SS Brigadeführer and Major General of the Waffen, SS Otto Kumm. This division consisted of over 90% ethnic Germans from the Banat and Serbia, from Romania, Croatia, Slovakia, and Hungary, and was partly characterized by a way of warfare that was reminiscent of the conditions of the 30 Years' War. For this, in 1947, in addition to numerous members of the 7th SS Division, Prince Eugen, 2 of its division commanders were executed in Yugoslavia by a Yugoslav court. SS Brigadeführer and Major General of the Waffen, SS Karl Ritter von Oberkamp, who was from Munich, and SS Brigadeführer and Major General of the Waffen SS August Schmidhuber, who was from Augsburg. Other units deployed for Operation Rösselsprung. Kampfgruppe, Kuna, consisting of the reinforced SS Reconnaissance Battalion 105 and the Croatian Reconnaissance Battalion 369, Panzer Grenadier Assault Battalion of the 2nd Panzer Army, Reinforced Grenadier Regiment, motorized, 92 under Colonel Werner von Hillebrandt with the attached Reconnaissance Battalion 54 and Regimental Group of the 2nd Croatian Jaeger Brigade, 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 1st Brandenburg Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm Walter with the attached Croatian Combat Group. 2 commando units from the 2nd Battalion of the 4th Brandenburg Regiment under Lieutenants Wolfram Kirchner and Lieutenant Dewey. 10 Abwehr soldiers under Lieutenant Savadil to secure important documents, maps, and so on. Air Control Group under Captain Bentrup, parts of the 264th Infantry Division stationed on the ground under General of the Infantry Martin Gerais. Parts of the 369th Croatian Infantry Division under General of the Infantry Fritz Neidholt, who, after the end of the war, was handed over to Yugoslavia by the Allies, charged with war crimes there, sentenced to death, and executed. Additional units for Operation Knight's Move, reinforced regimental battle group of the 373rd Croatian Infantry Division under Lieutenant General Eduard Altrian, including the 2nd Croatian Light Infantry Brigade, Light Infantry Regiment Reconnaissance Detachment, 373 Anti-Tank Battalion, 373 1 Battalion of Infantry Regiment, 383, and Battle Group Willem with Infantry Regiment 384 and the 2nd Company of Tank Battalion 202. Additionally, Croatian Landwehr or Home Guard in formation. In the north, 200 to 300 Ustaše fighters, subordinated to the 373rd Croatian Infantry Division. In the south, around 500 Chetnik fighters. Finally, the SS Paratrooper Battalion 500, which originated from the Probation Battalion. Battalion 500 was reinforced by 2 companies of the 1st Airborne Regiment and an attached SS Paratrooper Training Company, as well as the already mentioned Brandenburg Detachment Benisch, with 40 men. The first wave consisted, depending on the source, of between 654 and 729 men, including 314 soldiers deployed by parachute jump and another 340 by air landing with gliders. The second wave consisted of 171 men. When assessing the enemy's situation, the German intelligence service in the area of operations estimated a strength of around 12,000 partisans, while Yugoslav sources put the number at about 16,000. In addition, there were numerous fighters from the Communist Youth League of Yugoslavia. In the Drvar area, there were 2 large partisan units, the 1st and 6th Proletarian Divisions of the 1st Proletarian Corps, and 5 kilometers away, in Kamenica, was the 3rd League Brigade of the 1st Proletarian Division with 3 battalions. For the personal protection of Tito's headquarters, 2 companies were available, including female bodyguards. In some nearby small villages, there were small military missions from the Soviet Union, the United States of America, and Great Britain, where the son of the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Randolph Churchill, second from the left, served as a major. These military missions were also a target for the paratroopers. The attack was to be preceded by a heavy bombardment of partisan positions in and around Drvar by aircraft of the Air Commander Croatia, under Major General Walter Hagen. After that, all other ground units and formations were to both seal off the direct operational area around Drvar and directly engage the partisan brigades, then advance concentrically toward the paratrooper battalion. Mission for the paratroopers. The main focus of action for all parts of the battalion is Tito's Supreme Headquarters. As soon as the exact location of the headquarters is known, all parts of the battalion that have landed near this main target must immediately and ruthlessly eliminate Tito's Supreme Headquarters above all else. Important individuals should, if possible, be taken alive. Written material of value is to be preserved. Fires must absolutely be avoided in the staff buildings so that the intelligence officers can obtain valuable material. The personnel of the SS Paratrooper Battalion 500 which was formed in the autumn of 1943 and brought in from France, consisted of probationary soldiers and a larger number of volunteers. The probationary soldiers were soldiers and officers who could, in a sense, restore their military honor there due to minor to serious service offenses. The members of the battalion began their training in November at the Luftwaffe Paratrooper School 3 Mataruska Banja near Kraljevo in Serbia, and completed it at the beginning of 1944 in Papa, Hungary, after the school had been relocated there. At that time, the battalion consisted of 15 officers, 81 non-commissioned officers, and 896 men, organized into a headquarters company, a signal platoon, the 1st to 3rd SS paratrooper companies each with 3 platoons, as well as the 4th Heavy Paratrooper Company with 1 platoon each of heavy machine guns, mortars, flamethrowers, and, for anti-tank purposes, 4 75mm recoilless light guns, LG-40. After their training, the paratroopers had taken part in several smaller operations against Tito's partisans until, in mid-April 1944, now officially designated as SS Paratrooper Battalion 500, they waited for their deployment in the area of Bečkerek, Zagreb, and Banja Luka, and for security reasons were only informed about the operation a few hours before it began. Tito's headquarters was located just north of Drvar, above the town, in a cave. However, when rumors surfaced that this hideout had become known, he only used it during the day, and in the evening moved to another cave hideout in the town of Bastasi, about 7 kilometers west of Drvar. Another report, which the Germans initially believed, claimed that Tito's supposed headquarters was located on the grounds of a cemetery. Then came May 25, 1944, Tito's 52nd birthday. After celebrating with some loyal followers, and since all the situation reports indicated everything was calm, he stayed in his Drvar cave, which almost became his undoing. Because at 6:30 in the morning, he was awakened by an air raid from 5 squadrons of Ju-87 dive bombers on a suspected partisan location in Drvar, including the cemetery. In addition, a number of older Hangul HS-46 bombers and captured Italian bombers of the Caproni CA-314 type were also used. They were called captured bombers because in October 1943, Italy left the alliance and declared war on Germany, after which large parts of their army were disarmed. However, as can be read in the experience report of the 15th Mountain Army Corps headquarters, the Stukas, as well as the bombers, had almost completely missed their targets and hit the town of Drvar instead. German He-126, an Italian-captured aircraft with German insignia, had also attacked parts of the 1st Regiment Brandenburg. During takeoff, the same squadron had completely destroyed a German supply column by dropping bombs. Then, shortly after the bombardment, the photo was taken around 7 o'clock. Both the paratroopers had been dropped, and the gliders of the first wave had landed, during which there were initial losses due to the defensive fire of the surprise partisans. But since the attack had taken place quickly, the paratroopers had managed to take most of Drvar by 9 o'clock. While searching the houses for Tito, each paratrooper carried a photo of him in his pocket. The paratroopers sometimes took actions that were not covered by the rules of war. After the search for the prominent partisan leader in the town had not been successful, the paratroopers then searched for him in the supposed hiding place at the cemetery, but did not find him there either. When the resistance in the northern part of the town became increasingly stiff, Hauptsturmführer Rübke rightly suspected that the headquarters would more likely be located there. After he had gathered his forces, he launched a frontal attack across the Unach River at around 10:30 and managed to get within 50 meters of the cave before his men, already severely exhausted from lack of water, were driven back by heavy fire and suffered heavy losses again. because after the partisans had overcome the initial shock, they immediately began moving their forces from the west toward Drvar, in addition to the security battalion of the Supreme Headquarters shown here, 3 battalions of the 3rd Brigade of the 6th Lika Division. While 1 battalion, which had entrenched itself at the cemetery, attacked the paratroopers, the other 2 swung around to hit the paratroopers on the flank, which allowed them to reduce the pressure on the cave area. At around 11:15, when both sides had taken a short pause in the fighting, Tito had managed to flee the cave in haste. To do this, he, along with his dog and some men and women from his staff, had descended on a rope through a trapdoor at the entrance of the cave, then followed a small stream leading to the Unach River, until he climbed the heights to the east again and was safe. At 12 noon, the second wave of paratroopers was dropped west of the citadel, but directly into the fire of the now heavily assembled partisans, resulting in further significant losses. Rybka then tried to launch another attack on the now empty cave with the reinforcements, but the attack failed due to the constantly increasing pressure on his flanks. The fighting continued throughout the afternoon, with heavy losses on both sides. When Hauptsturmführer Rybka realized in the late afternoon that Tito had probably escaped and that contact with the supporting units of the 15th Mountain Corps could not be established, he gave the order to retreat. He had to abandon the defensive ring he had planned around the cellulose factory and the cemetery due to his heavy losses, and therefore limited himself to a tighter defensive position around the cemetery. Around 6 o'clock, he was seriously wounded and was flown out by the Feisler Storch, which was actually intended to take Tito away after his capture. Now the deputy battalion commander took command of the remnants of the battalion, which around 9:30 in the evening was encircled by strong partisan forces at the cemetery, and from then on had to repel one attack after another. Meanwhile, the 4th Battalion of the 3rd Liga Brigade had also arrived, as well as units of the 9th Dalmatian Division. At 3:30, the final partisan attack began, during which the cemetery wall was breached in several places. But despite significant losses, the paratroopers were able to hold their positions. As for the support of Battalion 500 by the units of the 15th Mountain Corps, they had been repeatedly held up during the day by the fighters of the 1st, 5th, and 8th Partisan Corps. Moreover, radio communications completely failed in the rugged mountainous terrain. The units of the Mountain Corps advancing toward Battalion 500 had also been attacked several times during the day by Allied aircraft stationed in Italy, but these attacks were repeatedly repelled by air support from the Luftwaffe. After the deputy battalion commander was also killed during the night fighting, the paratrooper officer Captain Bentrup, who had been assigned to the battalion from the 1st Parachute Regiment, now took command. He had the exhausted remnants of the battalion take up defensive positions behind the cemetery wall. After Tito's partisan units were unable to take the German positions even in the last attack, suffering heavy losses, and reports came in that motorized advance units of the 15th Mountain Corps were approaching threateningly, the partisans began to retreat. Tito himself was then picked up on June 3rd at Kupferstall by a Soviet aircraft of the U.S. model Dakota C-47, stationed at a Royal Air Force base in Italy, which was escorted by 6 American planes and was taken to Bari, Italy. 3 days later, a Royal Navy destroyer took him to the island of Vis on the Dalmatian coast, where he set up a new headquarters and first reviewed a parade. After the barely combat-capable remnants of Battalion 500 had spent the night of the 25th to the 26th of May in their hastily dug defensive positions without any outside support, at 5 o'clock, a German fighter-bomber attack on the retreating partisans finally brought them some relief. At 7 o'clock in the morning, radio contact could also be established with elements of the Front Reconnaissance Team of Reconnaissance Battalion 373 of the 373rd Croatian Infantry Division. But it was not until 12:45 in the afternoon that the forward elements of the Croatian 373rd Infantry Division and the Grenadier Regiment Motorized 92 arrived with the Willem Battle Group and relieved the depleted paratrooper battalion, whose survivors were physically at their limit. As for the reasons for the partial or complete failure of radio communications, one can read in the experience report. Despite the greatest efforts of all signal personnel, who were working almost non-stop at times, the communications could in no way meet the tactical requirements. The General Command sees the main cause in the overly complicated organization of radio technology, with connections to units not originally intended only possible after time-consuming delivery of documents. Communication equipment is constantly overloaded, preventing any further usage. The impossibility of giving tactical messages priority, since urgency labels are repeatedly misused for less important deadline reminders and so on. Thus, on either the 25th or 26th, an urgent order to the 7th SS Division could only be transmitted after several hours, because they constantly had to receive emergency war reports from other units, presumably their own general command. In the inadequate training of the tactical units to report continuously, briefly, and yet comprehensively, a remarkable exception throughout the entire operation was the 7th SS Mountain Division. Its communication system and reporting traffic worked well. As is often the case after such operations, this failed mission was turned into a success story, and not just by Berlin's propaganda. You only have to read the self-satisfied report of the 2nd Panzer Army, in which pages and pages of destroyed and captured weapons and vehicles were listed, along with unbelievably high enemy casualty figures. It all sounded very impressive, but it couldn't hide the fact that Operation Rösselsprung was mainly intended to eliminate Tito and his staff, as well as the Soviet, British, and American military missions, none of which was achieved, not even in the slightest. That also makes the comment of Ribke's successor as commander of Battalion 500, SS Hauptsturmführer Siegfried Milius, somewhat vague. The operation, including the jump and landing, was successful. Tito and the Allied military delegations managed to escape. In reality, the success consisted of capturing Tito's uniform, some flags from the Anglo-American military mission, a jeep given to Tito by the Americans, and the capture of 3 Allied officers, one of whom later managed to escape as well. And the intelligence gathered was, contrary to the reports, not of much use. However, during the battles with the partisans, almost all of the cargo gliders and a large portion of the vehicles were destroyed. In contrast, the dramatic escape of Tito, who enjoyed an almost godlike status among the Yugoslav population, further enhanced his myth. And although the operations of his headquarters were indeed temporarily disrupted, and several of his high-ranking staff were killed in the fighting, within a few weeks the partisans had regained control of the Drvar area. The casualty figures are a subject in themselves. All the available figures, both in German and Yugoslav sources, regarding their own and enemy losses are so contradictory that it is not even possible to provide reasonably reliable estimates. It is often reported that the paratrooper Battalion 500 was destroyed in the fighting, since out of the 874 soldiers who landed in Drvar, only about 200 survived at the end of the battle. However, according to the battalion's own official report from June 10th, there were 61 killed, 114 seriously wounded, 91 lightly wounded, and 11 missing, which amounts to a total of 277 casualties. An earlier report from June 7th had even given lower numbers: 50 killed, 132 wounded, and 6 missing, making a total of 188. Even if you add the losses from the 36 to 40 cargo gliders, 5 killed and 7 wounded, and the 2 killed and 24 wounded from the 2 defense squads, you still don't reach the supposed 650 casualties. Nevertheless, it can be assumed that the battalion's losses were higher than the numbers officially reported by the German side. Yugoslav sources speak of up to 400 killed. The number of losses mentioned in the German Wehrmacht report of July 6, 1944, of 6,240 fallen partisans, is likely to be greatly exaggerated. During Operation Rösselsprung, a unit deployed in the 2nd Panzer Army reported that on the German side, 213 soldiers were killed, 881 wounded, and 750 missing. Enemy losses were reported as 1,916 counted, and over 1,400 estimated killed partisans. In this radio message, the unit commander had requested clarification on how the number of 6,240 enemy dead had been arrived at in the Wehrmacht report. As for the SS Paratrooper Battalion 500, the only paratrooper unit of the SS, it was subsequently replenished and renamed SS Paratrooper Battalion 600. Rösselsprung was the sole operation that involved a parachute jump. At the end of the war, in northern Germany, repeatedly involved in retreat battles, the SS Paratrooper Battalion 500/600 was practically wiped out after an existence of only 18 months. At the beginning of May 1945, the remnants of the battalion surrendered to American troops in the Weser Triangle area. If you look at the mistakes made during this operation, probably the most consequential one was a mistake often found on the German side, underestimating the enemy while committing too few forces. Furthermore, there was inaccurate information about the whereabouts of Titus or the High Command in Drvar. The after-action report states that the prior reconnaissance failed. The High Command was only partially informed about the changes that occurred during the operation, so at times it seems that the Army and the High Command were working from different assessments of the enemy. However, the former commander of the 4th Brandenburg Regiment blamed both the planning of the 15th Mountain Corps and that of the SS, since they did not believe the reports passed on by Brandenburg that Tito was most likely staying near the citadel of Drvar in a mountain cave. It is also possible, however, that the Brandenburgers, who specialized in such operations, felt bypassed, which could also explain the deployment of the 2 battalions of the 1st Regiment during Operation Rösselsprung, which I will address shortly. In any case, the original plan was that Paratrooper Battalion 500 would be dropped, quote, with heavy use of our own Air Force and accepting any risk, with the mission, attention, here it comes, in coordination with elements of the Brandenburg Division deployed early in full camouflage, to eliminate the enemy command center. Perhaps the Brandenburgers also remembered the earlier operation under the code name Wildschütz, in which a commando platoon from their 4th Regiment, operating in full camouflage under Lieutenant Kern, together with an SS unit, came close to capturing Tito. But just before the Brandenburgers could strike, he was warned by a guard dog and managed to escape because the cordon set up by the SS paratroopers was not tight. Brandenburg had also criticized the fact that, for example, they had failed to deploy a reinforced paratrooper platoon on the mountain plateau above the cave to cut off Tito and his top staff's escape route. When looking at Operation Rösselsprung, for which a large part of the plans and reports are available, the most interesting is the after-action report of the 7th Division, which names names and details. Battalion commanders and company leaders must finally learn to think and act as part of the whole. And I believe they are fighting the battle on their own. Ordered reporting times must be observed, otherwise the command will not be able to coordinate all units or relieve embattled combat groups. Or to the Air Force. It was extremely disconcerting that the Croatian Air Force would take off at any time upon the division's request, while our own Air Force was always grounded and unable to fly. Or to clothing. In contrast to the clothing dropped to the Red troops by the Allies, the current clothing of the mountain infantry does not meet the requirements of several weeks of fighting against partisans. The quality of the English uniforms is better, and they last longer. And regarding the rations, the impractical composition of the current rations has been confirmed once again, and so on and so forth. The report of the 15th Mountain Corps also does not hold back on criticism. This is what you read under the section on secrecy. Secrecy was heavily stressed. In fact, several long-distance calls were made by individual workers, referring to the upcoming operation, the discussed intention, and similar matters. In fact, even before the General Command received the first briefing, rumors about the upcoming operation were circulating in Bihać. The Air Force ground personnel inferred from a bombing raid on Petrovac and Drvar that an operation was targeting those locations. In Bihać, on May 23rd, the rumor was going around that Tito was to be captured now. Furthermore, the report notes that it is possible that the Abwehr, like the Brandenburg Division or other agencies, possibly referring to SS Sturmbannführer, that is, Major Otto Skorzeny, may have received orders to locate Tito's hideout. In contrast, the former commander of the Prince Eugen Division, Otto Kuhm, wrote that he had spoken with Skorzeny days before the operation, who was also in command of the 500th Paratrooper Battalion. However, he had declined to participate personally in the operation, since according to his intelligence findings, the enemy was aware of all the details of the operation. This is also confirmed by the report of experience, according to which an interrogation of a prisoner revealed that Tito's staff was said to have known the day of the attack. The report of experience from the 15th Army Corps also deals with the assessment of the combat effectiveness of the large units deployed in Operation Rösselsprung. 373rd Croatian Infantry Division with 40 killed, 85 wounded, and 22 missing. Previous experience has confirmed that the Croatian troops, under strict German leadership, fully hold their own in attacks and in shorter combat actions. They are not able to hold out for a longer period of time. The Croatian units require excellent German leaders. The combat effectiveness of their unit rises and falls with their personal example. Apart from a brief moment of weakness, which was mainly due to insufficient supply possibilities and the almost complete breakdown of all communications, the division fulfilled the expectations placed in it. 1st Regiment Brandenburg, 10 killed, 105 wounded. The courage and readiness for action of the leaders, as well as all members of the regiment, is beyond doubt. Still, the regiment was disappointing overall. The commander rejected a special assignment, even one for special camouflage purposes, as not possible because he did not have enough combat interpreters. In terms of troop deployment, the regiment did not accomplish much because, due to its composition, it did not believe itself capable of doing so. In fact, the regiment did not prevail against the enemy at any point. The tactical leadership and the reporting system were inadequate. In the event of a landing, not too much should be expected from the combat effectiveness and the planned counterattack of the regiment. Based on previous experience, the usefulness of the regiment's organization must be doubted. In its current composition, it does not seem fully suitable for either task. The designation regiment will repeatedly lead to false assumptions. 7th SS Mountain Division and parts of the 5th SS Corps. As the only mountain troops, the SS units bore the burden of the operation and achieved the main successes. Readiness for action, daring, especially among company and battalion leadership, good clear command, and correspondingly clear reporting are to be emphasized. Grenadier Regiment Motorized 92, 9 killed, 38 wounded, 6 missing. The regiment's leadership was unsatisfactory. They failed to advance as the situation required. Previous experiences seem to be confirmed, according to which the regiment is reluctant to leave the road and move into the field, and as a result, never really engages the enemy. There is no doubt that the regiment has become dulled by its almost constant deployments. It does not fully commit itself, but behaves harshly towards the population. Cases of unnecessary arson, lack of any loot papers are findings made during every deployment of the regiment. The matter will be pursued further from here. Paratrooper Battalion, 500, an Armored Grenadier, Assault Battalion of the 2nd Panzer Army. 18 killed, 55 wounded, 1 missing. Due to the short duration of the deployment and the changing chain of command, they cannot be sufficiently assessed. As far as is known so far, they have fulfilled all assigned tasks. 2nd Croatian Light Infantry Brigade. As expected, the combat effectiveness of the brigade has hardly changed as a result of their stay at the German training ground. The officers remain just as incompetent, arrogant, and cowardly. Their negative attitude toward everything German has actually intensified. In the operation, the Jaeger Regiment 1 appeared only as filler, without any of its own achievements. The rest of the brigade largely fails to secure the main supply route. If you add up all the omissions and mistakes in the planning of Rösselsprung, the unclear command structures, the lack of reconnaissance and radio communication, the insufficient deployment of forces, the rivalry between the SS and the Brandenburgers, and the unreliable Croatian allies, you can also consider this failed German parachute operation as a suicide mission, in which, alongside a high number of partisans and mostly uninvolved civilians, many young German paratroopers also lost their lives without achieving the intended success. In my opinion, the fact that, in the further course of Rösselsprung, the destruction of 3 proletarian divisions by the SS division, Prince Eugen, was achieved, where the division again stood out for its excessively harsh conduct, should not be regarded as too great a success because, once again, unnecessary sacrifices of people and resources were made. After all, it was hardly to be expected that Tito's partisans would capture Berlin. Just a few weeks later, however, the entire Army Group Center was destroyed by the Soviet offensive bagration. Here are my 2 videos on that. And when the German operation Rösselsprung was called off on June 6, 1944, strong Anglo-American, Canadian, and Polish units landed in the French Normandy, 1,800 kilometers away, on the very same day, which meant that the Allied armies were now encircling Germany from the west as well.